Pine Valley seemed like the perfect place for a fresh start. At least that's what April Madison thought as she looked out the bus window at the approaching sign. Welcome to Pine Valley, population 6,124. Snow-capped mountains on the horizon, neat streets lined with small houses, and a main street that looked like it had come straight out of a glossy magazine about small American towns. April clutched the worn bag on her lap more tightly. At 19, she already knew that appearances could be deceiving. Her hometown of Westbrook had taught her that lesson all too well. Beautiful facades often hid something rotten inside. But that didn't matter now. April had left her past 400 miles behind and was determined to start over. "Last stop, Pine Valley," the driver announced. And April got up from her seat. The town greeted her with the piercing cold of a February day. April turned up the collar of her jacket and headed for the only hotel in town, the Pine Valley. She planned to spend the night there before her job interview the next day. The nanny job with the foster family was her only chance. The online ad promised room and board and a decent salary, enough to save up for her first year of college. Responsible nanny needed for 7-year-old girl, experience with children required. April added to her resume that she had worked at a summer camp, which was not true. One little lie for a big dream seemed justified. The foster home was located in the northern part of town, in an area where the wealthiest families in Pine Valley lived. The 2-story building with large windows and a well-kept yard looked impressive, but not pretentious. April froze for a moment in front of the entrance, fixed her hair, and pressed the doorbell. The door was opened by an elegant woman of about 35. Her light hair was pulled back into a neat bun, and her eyes betrayed a mixture of fatigue and tension, which she carefully masked with a smile. "You must be April. I'm Catherine Foster. Please come in." Inside, the house was as immaculate as the outside. Minimalist design, expensive furniture, framed family photos, everything spoke of prosperity and stability. "My daughter Olivia is at school and my husband is at work, so we have time to talk," said Catherine, leading April into the spacious kitchen. Over a cup of tea, Catherine asked about her previous work experience, education, and plans for the future. April diligently maintained the story she had created, answering confidently, but with a touch of modesty that she hoped would endear her to her potential employer. "I'm a psychotherapist," Catherine explained. "My practice is in an extension to the house, so technically I work from home, but I can't constantly be interrupted to look after Olivia. And my husband Daniel is the chief engineer at a paper mill. He often works late." April detected a hint of irritation in her voice, but decided not to read too much into it. "Olivia is a wonderful girl, but she needs a lot of attention. After school, she needs help with her homework, and I have to take her to ballet and swimming. And when I have evening sessions with patients, I have to cook dinner and put her to bed." April nodded, mentally calculating whether her cooking skills would suffice. She could only cook pasta and scrambled eggs. "We have one important rule, April." Catherine looked intently into her eyes. "My husband and I value our privacy. Everything that happens in this house stays between us. Pine Valley is a small town where gossip spreads faster than a forest fire." "Of course I understand," April assured her hastily. "I'm good at keeping secrets." Catherine smiled, but her eyes remained wary. "Well, I think you're just right for us. The nanny's room is on the 2nd floor next to the children's room. When could you start?" "Tomorrow," April replied, trying to hide her joy and relief. Olivia Foster turned out to be a child with a strong personality. The light-haired girl with serious eyes studied April with the wariness of a wild animal. "You won't last here," she declared at dinner on her first night. "None of them do." "That's not true, dear," Catherine interjected hastily. "Miss Liz was with us for almost a year, and then she left without even saying goodbye," Olivia said stubbornly, furrowing her brow. "And Mrs. Parker, too." April glanced from her daughter to her mother, sensing the unspoken tension. Something told her that the rapid turnover of nannies in this house was no coincidence. "I'm not going anywhere," she said softly to Olivia. "I promise I'll always let you know in advance." At that moment, the front door opened, and a tall man in a business suit appeared in the kitchen doorway. Daniel Foster was exactly as April had imagined him from the photos on the walls, fit, with a confident bearing and attentive eyes. But there was something else about him that the photos didn't convey. A strange intensity in his gaze, too intense for a casual acquaintance. "You must be the new nanny," he said with a slight smile, extending his hand. "Welcome to our family." His handshake was firm and lasted a fraction of a second longer than it should have. April felt something stir inside her, a premonition perhaps, or an echo of a strange excitement. "Dad, you promised to help me with my science project." Olivia tugged at her father's sleeve insistently. "Of course, Princess. Just let me change." Catherine watched them silently, and April couldn't help but notice the shadow that crossed her face. The first week in the foster home was spent getting used to the new routine. April woke up at 6:30 to help Olivia get ready for school. Catherine was usually already up, making breakfast and checking the day's schedule. Daniel showed up later, hurriedly drank his coffee and left for work, rarely staying more than 15 minutes. After school, April helped Olivia with her homework, drove her to her activities, and prepared simple meals for dinner. Catherine saw patients in her office, a separate space with a private entrance that April and Olivia were strictly forbidden to enter during sessions. On Friday evening, when Olivia was already asleep and Catherine was delayed with her last patient, April went down to the kitchen for a glass of water and unexpectedly ran into Daniel. He was sitting at the table in the semi-darkness with a bottle of whiskey and a half-empty glass. "Can't sleep?" he asked, and April froze in the doorway, not knowing whether to leave or stay. "Just wanted some water," she replied. "Want to join me?" He pointed to the bottle. "I promise I won't tell Catherine that I served alcohol to a minor." April smiled nervously. "Actually, I'm already 19. Still too young for whiskey, but I won't judge. At your age, I was experimenting a lot." His gaze slid over her from head to toe in a way that made her uncomfortable. April suddenly realized that she was wearing only a thin t-shirt and pajama shorts. "Thanks, but I think I'll pass," she said, walking over to the sink and pouring herself some water. "How do you like it here? Is Olivia giving you a hard time?" "No, she's a wonderful girl. Smart, creative. She takes after her mother." He took a sip. "Catherine is a genius at understanding people. Sometimes I feel like she can read my mind." There was a hint of bitterness in his words that he made no attempt to hide. "It must be hard to live with someone who can see right through you," April said cautiously. Daniel looked up at her, and a flash of surprise crossed his eyes, replaced by interest. "Exactly. It's like living under a microscope. Every action is analyzed, every word is interpreted." He shook his head. "I'm sorry, I shouldn't have brought it up." "It's okay." April shifted awkwardly from foot to foot. "I'm a good listener." "I've noticed," he said, looking at her again with that special look. "That's your strength, April. People will tell you their secrets without even knowing why." Something in his tone made her inwardly wary, but before she could respond, the front door opened and she heard Catherine's footsteps. "I have to go," April said quickly, and headed for the kitchen door. "April," Daniel called after her, "don't tell Catherine about our conversation. She doesn't like it when I share personal things with strangers." April nodded and hurried upstairs, feeling strangely uneasy. Something was wrong at the Foster's house, and she was only beginning to realize what she had gotten herself into. Over the weekend, the Fosters threw a barbecue for their neighbors and friends. April helped with the preparations, trying to stay in the shadows and not attract attention. Olivia proudly introduced her as "my new favorite nanny," which warmed April's heart. Among the guests, Sheriff Thomas Baker stood out, a heavy-set man with piercing eyes and a good-natured smile. He watched April with obvious interest, asking her unobtrusive questions about her past and her plans for the future. "Where did you say you're from?" "Westbrook, it's 4 hours away." "Westbrook, I think I've been there on business. What made you leave?" April looked away. "I just wanted a change. Small towns can be stifling sometimes." "And you came to an even smaller town," the sheriff grinned. "Interesting choice." "Tom, don't interrogate the girl," Daniel interjected, appearing unexpectedly and placing his hand on April's shoulder. "She's not here to answer questions from the police. Just showing an interest in new faces in our town," the sheriff replied good-naturedly, but his gaze lingered on Daniel's hand a little longer than necessary. April felt Daniel's fingers tense on her shoulder. An invisible current seemed to run between the two men. "April, can you help me in the kitchen?" Catherine called, and the girl slipped out of Daniel's arm with relief. In the kitchen, Catherine silently chopped vegetables for a salad, but April sensed that she wanted to say something. "Be careful with Thomas," Catherine finally said, without looking up from the cutting board. "He's a good man and our friend, but he has a professional habit of digging into other people's dirty laundry." "I have nothing to hide," April lied, feeling her pulse quicken. "Everyone has something to hide, April." Catherine finally looked up at her. "Sometimes even from ourselves." There was such piercing insight in her gaze that April felt exposed. Did Catherine know something about her past? Or about her strange conversation with Daniel? "By the way, I noticed you and Daniel were talking late on Friday night," Catherine said casually. "What about, if you don't mind me asking?" April froze, remembering Daniel's request not to tell his wife about their conversation. "Nothing in particular," she forced herself to smile. "Just small talk." Catherine studied her face for a few long seconds, then nodded. "All right, please take this salad to the table." As she left the kitchen, April bumped into Daniel in the doorway. Their hands touched briefly, and he winked at her unexpectedly. It was a fleeting gesture that could have gone unnoticed, but April suddenly realized that she had stumbled into a complex web of relationships where every word and action had a hidden meaning. By the end of the evening, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was caught in the middle of an invisible field of tension between Daniel, Catherine, and Sheriff Baker. And something told her that this was only the beginning. A month had passed since April had stepped into the foster home. The March snow was gradually melting, revealing patches of bare ground and, with them, the first signs that her position in the family was beginning to change. It started with little things. Daniel began coming home from work earlier on the days when Catherine had evening sessions with patients. He would appear in the nursery doorway when April was reading Olivia to bed and linger to listen to her voice. Sometimes he would bring his work home and sit at the kitchen table while April was cooking dinner. "You have a good influence on Olivia," he said one evening as he watched April chop vegetables for a salad. "She's calmer. Even her teachers have noticed." "She's just gotten used to me," April replied, trying to concentrate on the knife in her hand. "Children need stability." "And not just children," Daniel said, standing up and coming closer, pretending to take a glass from the shelf. For a moment he was so close that April could feel the warmth of his body. "You know, I can't remember the last time this house was so peaceful." April remained silent, feeling her pulse quicken. She knew she should step away, say something sharp, or just leave. But instead, she continued cutting the pepper, sliding the knife across the cutting board with exaggerated care. "April." Daniel's voice became quieter, more intimate. "Have you ever wondered why we chose you out of all the candidates?" She finally looked up. "Because I was qualified and available?" Daniel smiled. "Because you were the only one who looked Catherine straight in the eye and didn't look away. You're not afraid." "What should I be afraid of?" "People who see right through you." He paused. "Or yourself." At that moment, the front door opened, and they heard Catherine's voice saying goodbye to a patient. Daniel stepped back, and the tension of the moment dissolved as if it had never been there. A few days later, Catherine asked April to go shopping with her. On the way to the mall in the next town, she was unusually quiet. "Is everything okay?" April ventured to ask. Catherine glanced at her quickly and returned her attention to the road. "I've noticed that Daniel's been home more often lately." April felt a chill run down her spine. "Is that a bad thing?" "It's unusual," Catherine said, gripping the steering wheel tighter. "For the last 2 years, he's been finding any excuse to stay late at work. Projects, meetings, company parties." She paused, as if deciding whether to continue. "Daniel is a very charming man, April, and he knows it. He knows the effect he has on women." April was silent, not knowing what to say. "I'm not blind," Catherine continued in a quiet but firm voice. "And I'm not stupid. I see the way he looks at you. Mrs. Foster, Catherine, please. And I'm not blaming you." She smiled bitterly. "It's his modus operandi, finding young, vulnerable girls with nowhere to go. April felt the blood drain from her face. You think Mr. Foster and I— No, not yet. Catherine turned into the shopping center parking lot. But I think he would want it. And I want to warn you, April, not to protect my marriage. Daniel and I have been living like roommates for a long time, but to protect you. She turned off the engine and turned to April. The last nanny, Liz, was not much older than you. She fell in love with Daniel, believed his promises of divorce and a new life. And when she realized he would never leave me, Olivia, or his reputation in town, she left in the middle of the night. 2 weeks later, she was found in a motel with an overdose of pills. April froze, unable to believe her ears. She survived. Barely, but her life is ruined. Catherine looked April straight in the eye. I don't want that to happen again. Catherine's words should have sobered April up, but instead they only fueled her curiosity. April began to notice little things about Daniel's behavior that she had missed before. How he lingered on her lips when she spoke, how he found excuses to touch her, how his voice changed when they were alone. She knew she was playing with fire, but she couldn't, or wouldn't, stop. Maybe it was because, for the first time in her life, she felt power over someone else. Or maybe it was because danger stirred her blood after years of dullness in Westbrook. One evening, when Catherine was away at a conference for the weekend and Olivia was already asleep, Daniel invited April to have a glass of wine in the backyard. The April air was still cool, but they wrapped themselves in blankets and sat in deck chairs, looking up at the stars. Tell me about yourself, April. The real you, not the version you presented at the interview. April tensed. What do you mean? Come on, I checked. He took a sip of wine. There was never a counselor with your name at Westbrook Summer Camp, and your recommendation letters are fake and not even very good ones. April's heart pounded. Are you going to tell Catherine? No, Daniel turned to her. But I want to know the truth. Why did you lie? What are you running from? April was silent for a long time, staring into the darkness. Then she slowly said, I had a difficult situation at Westbrook, with a man who had power over me. A guy? Daniel's voice sounded jealous. No, my stepfather. She took a sip of wine to hide the tremor in her voice. He controlled my every move. After my mom died, it became completely unbearable. That was only part of the truth, but even that was hard to say out loud. You ran away. Yes. And now you're afraid he'll find you. April nodded, unable to speak. Daniel unexpectedly took her hand. I can protect you, April, if you let me. She looked at their joined hands and felt dizzy, and it had nothing to do with the wine. She knew she should pull her hand away, but instead her fingers tightened in response. Who will protect me from you? She asked quietly. Daniel lifted her hand to his lips and kissed her knuckles lightly. No one, he whispered. And that's the beauty of it. The next morning, April woke up feeling guilty and confused. Nothing serious had happened, just a touch of hands and one innocent kiss. But she knew she had crossed an invisible line, and there was no turning back. Olivia noticed the change in her mood and was especially quiet all day, as if afraid to scare April away with a careless word. Are you leaving too? She asked in the evening as April tucked her into bed. No, of course not. Why would you think that? Liz looked just like that before she disappeared, sad and pensive. Olivia hugged her teddy bear tighter. Dad said she went to another city to become an actress, but I heard him and Mom arguing about her. April felt her heart sink. What were they arguing about? Mom said she'd call the police if Dad didn't stop, and Dad said Mom was ruining people's lives with her suspicions. Olivia paused. And then Liz disappeared, and Mrs. Parker disappeared too. April gently stroked the girl's head. Where did Mrs. Parker go? I don't know. She just stopped coming. Dad said she was sick, but I saw her at the supermarket a month later. She looked healthy, but when she saw me, she quickly walked away. An alarm bell rang in April's head. Something was very wrong here. Catherine returned from her conference on Sunday evening. She looked tired but strangely determined. Daniel wasn't home. He had left for a meeting with clients and promised to be back late. "How was your weekend?" Catherine asked, unpacking her suitcase. "Quiet," April said, trying to make her voice sound natural. "Olivia was good. We went to the movies and the playground." "And Daniel?" April froze, feeling the color drain from her face. "He was busy with his work." Catherine looked at her for a long moment. "April, remember our conversation in the car?" "Yes." "There's something I didn't tell you," Catherine said, walking over to her bag and taking out an envelope. "Daniel isn't just a charming man with a penchant for young women. He has problems." She handed the envelope to April. "These are his credit card statements for the last year. Take a look at the amounts and the recipients." With trembling hands, April opened the envelope and looked through the papers. Huge sums of money withdrawn from casinos, online bets, loans. "He's a gambler," Catherine said quietly, "and he's in debt, deep in debt." "Why are you showing me this?" "Because you're in danger, April, and I'm not talking about your heart." Catherine took the papers and hid them back in her bag. "Daniel uses people. He always has, but lately his behavior has become unpredictable. I'm afraid that one day he'll cross the line." April remembered his words about protecting her, his touch, his promise of power over her. It all took on a new, sinister meaning. "What should I do?" she asked, feeling the ground slip away beneath her feet. "Leave," Catherine replied simply, "before it's too late." But April didn't leave. Something kept her there, whether it was Stockholm Syndrome, teenage rebellion, or genuine feelings for Olivia, who so desperately needed stability. Or maybe it was morbid curiosity, a desire to see how far things would go. In late April, when the lilacs were beginning to bloom, Daniel invited April to dinner. Catherine was out again, having taken Olivia to spend the weekend with her mother. "Nothing special," he said, seeing her hesitation. "Just dinner at a nice restaurant. You deserve a little treat for all your hard work." The restaurant was in a neighboring town where no one knew them. Daniel ordered champagne and delicacies, and for the first time, April felt grown up and desirable. "You're beautiful," he said, looking at her over his glass. "And you deserve more than a life as a nanny in someone else's house." "Like what?" She knew she was playing with fire, but she couldn't resist the temptation. "Like college, a career, travel." He reached across the table and touched her fingers. "I could help you with that." "Why?" She looked him straight in the eye. "Why do you want to help me?" "Because I see something special in you, April. Something that's rare in people, a combination of vulnerability and strength." "And what do you get in return?" Daniel smiled. "Your company, your time, your trust." He didn't say you, but it was implied. April knew where this was going, and part of her wanted it. The forbidden, dangerous adult thing. After dinner, they drove back to Pine Valley. On the way, Daniel turned off the road onto a lookout point above the town. Below, the lights twinkled like jewels scattered on black velvet. "Beautiful, isn't it?" He turned off the engine. April nodded, feeling her heart pound. "April," Daniel turned to her. "I can't stop thinking about you. Not since the day you walked through our door." He reached for her, and she didn't pull away. Their kiss was unexpectedly tender, as if he was afraid of scaring her away. But when April responded, something changed. The kiss became deeper, more insistent. Daniel's hands slid down her body, and she felt herself losing control of the situation. "Stop!" she breathed, pulling away. "I can't, not now." Daniel froze, then nodded slowly. "Of course, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to pressure you." But in his eyes, April saw a shadow of disappointment and something else. Something cold and calculating that made her shudder inside. That evening, when she returned home, April found an envelope under her bedroom door. Inside was a wad of cash, more than her monthly salary, and a note. For college, no strings attached, D. She stared at the money for a long time, feeling panic rising inside her. This was no longer a flirtation or innocent fun. It was something much more serious and dangerous. That night, April couldn't sleep. She thought about Catherine's words, about Daniel's debts, about the missing nannies, and about her past in Westbrook, which she was trying so desperately to escape. Dawn broke as she sat on the edge of her bed with her phone in her hand. The screen showed the contact Sheriff Baker, whose number she had discreetly saved after meeting him at the barbecue. April stared at the call button, unable to make up her mind. Talking to the sheriff meant revealing not only the Foster family's secrets, but her own as well. And yet, looking at the envelope with the money, she felt like she was standing on the edge of a precipice with no way out. The envelope with the money burned her hands. April sorted through the bills, trying to decide what to do next. Call the sheriff? Leave before it was too late? Talk to Catherine? The sound of a car pulling up interrupted her thoughts. Through the window, April saw Catherine and Olivia getting out of the car. They had returned a day earlier than planned. April quickly hid the money under the mattress and went downstairs. "Grandma's sick, so we decided not to stay until Monday," Catherine explained, dragging the suitcases into the hallway. Her gaze lingered on April, studying her face. "Are you okay? You look worried." "I just didn't get enough sleep," April lied, helping with the luggage. "How was the trip?" "Boring," Olivia chimed in. "Grandma slept the whole time and Mom worked." "I had some urgent reports to finish," Catherine explained. "Is Daniel home?" "No, April hesitated, unsure whether to mention last night's dinner. "I haven't seen him since this morning." Catherine looked at her intently. "Olivia, why don't you unpack? I need to talk to April." When Olivia ran upstairs, Catherine motioned for April to follow her into the kitchen. "Did something happen while we were out?" she asked bluntly. April hesitated. What was happening between her and Daniel was wrong, but telling Catherine would mean admitting her guilt, and yet lying seemed even worse. "Daniel asked me out to dinner," she finally said, staring at the floor. "To a restaurant in Ridgeville." Catherine's face froze. "And what happened?" "We talked. He kissed me." April forced herself to look up. "I stopped him, but then he left me money. A lot of money. He said it was for college." Catherine slowly sank into a chair. "Show me." April went up to her room and returned with an envelope. Catherine counted the money, exactly $10,000. "He took it from our joint account," she said quietly. "The account I contribute to from my income because all of Daniel's money goes to pay off his debts." Suddenly, she laughed, a dry, joyless laugh. $10,000. That's how much my humiliation is worth. That's the price of my blindness. "Catherine, I didn't mean to." "I know, April, you're not the first, and I'm afraid you won't be the last," Catherine said, looking at the money with disgust. "But this is a new level for him. He usually operates more subtly." "What do you mean?" "Daniel collects people, especially women. He charms them, makes them feel special, unique. Then he uses them and discards them." Catherine looked April straight in the eye. "But he's never paid so openly before." April felt her cheeks burn with shame. "I didn't take the money. I was going to give it back." "Of course, because you're not like the other girls, are you?" There was no anger in Catherine's voice, only weariness. They all thought that. At that moment, the front door opened and they heard Daniel's voice. "Catherine, are you back already?" Catherine quickly hid the money under a kitchen towel before Daniel entered the kitchen. His face froze for a moment at the sight of his wife and April sitting next to her, but he quickly regained his composure. "You're early. Did something happen?" "Mom is sick," Catherine replied simply. Then, without changing her tone, she added, "April and I were just discussing her future in our family." Daniel glanced warily at April. "And what conclusion did you come to?" "April is a wonderful nanny, but we think she should seriously consider college," Catherine said, picking up the towel and opening the envelope containing the money. "Isn't that right, dear?" Daniel's face froze. He looked from the envelope to April, and she saw cold fury in his eyes. "I can explain," he began, but Catherine interrupted him. "No, don't. I understand perfectly. As always," she said, standing up. "April, you'd better go up to Olivia. Daniel and I need to talk." April hurried out of the kitchen but didn't go upstairs. Instead, she lingered in the hallway, listening to the muffled voices. "The last time, Daniel, I swear to God, it's the last time. You've got it all wrong. It's just helping out. She's a good girl. She deserves an education. Don't you dare lie to my face. What are you going to do? Kick her out? Make a scene? Think about Olivia." "She's all I think about." All these years, she's all I've ever thought about. Otherwise, I would have left long ago. The sound of breaking glass made April flinch. "You're not going anywhere." Daniel's voice grew quieter, but even more frightening. "You have nothing. Everything. The house, the car, your practice. It's all in my name. You forgot about the evidence, the recordings, the photographs, the financial documents, everything I've collected over the years. Why do you think I'm still here? Because I'm afraid of you? No, because I know that if I make a move, you'll destroy me. But now I have insurance." There was a long pause. "What are you talking about?" Daniel's voice sounded tense. "There's a package of documents at a lawyer's office in Denver. If anything happens to me, or if I simply don't call him every month, everything will be handed over to the police." Silence fell again. Then she heard footsteps. April barely had time to duck around the corner before Daniel burst out of the kitchen and ran out of the house. A few seconds later, she heard the roar of his car engine. April slowly returned to the kitchen. Catherine stood at the window, watching Daniel's car disappear into the distance. "I should leave," April said quietly. Catherine didn't turn around. "Where would you go?" "I don't know. Anywhere." "With $10,000 in your pocket, you won't get very far." Catherine finally turned to her. "Especially if someone's hunting you." April shuddered. "What do you mean?" "I've done some digging, April. Westbrook is looking for a girl suspected of stealing $50,000 from her stepfather, a local businessman named Frank Donovan." April felt the ground slip away beneath her feet. "I didn't steal that money." "But you took it and you ran away. He abused me. After my mom died, it only got worse. Constant control, threats, humiliation." April clenched her fists. "That money was mine. My mother left it to me, but Frank wouldn't let me touch it. I just took what was rightfully mine. And now you're on the run, with no ID, no support, and a criminal case hanging over your head." Catherine shook her head. "The perfect target for Daniel. Did you know all along?" April felt a wave of shame and anger wash over her. "No, I only started digging after I noticed Daniel's interest in you. He always picks the vulnerable. It's his modus operandi." Catherine slumped wearily into a chair. "I'm not going to turn you into the police, April, and I'm not going to fire you. In fact, I'm offering you a deal." "A deal?" "Help me gather evidence against Daniel. Financial fraud, emotional abuse, manipulation, whatever you can find. In exchange, I'll help clear your name." "How?" "I have connections and resources." Catherine looked determined. "Frank Donovan isn't the first man who's tried to control women with money and fear, and I know how to deal with men like that." April hesitated. "Why are you helping me, after everything I've done?" "Because you're a victim, April, just like me." Catherine smiled bitterly. "And because I have a daughter who could one day find herself in your place. And I hope that when she does, there will be someone there to lend her a helping hand." The plan was simple. April would continue working as a nanny and maintain the illusion of interest in Daniel while gathering information about his financial affairs and connections. Catherine, in turn, would deal with Frank Donovan and prepare the divorce papers. Daniel returned home late in the evening. He was sober, but his eyes were feverishly bright. April didn't sleep a wink that night, listening to every sound in the house and keeping her phone close at hand. The next day, Daniel acted as if nothing had happened. He was polite to Catherine and affectionate with Olivia. He barely spoke to April, but when Catherine was distracted, he quickly whispered, "We need to talk. Tonight." April nodded, feeling her pulse quicken. This was her chance to get information. That evening, after Catherine had left to visit a patient and Olivia was asleep, Daniel called April into his office. "You shouldn't have told her," he began without preamble. "I was scared. The money, the kiss. It was all too fast." Daniel studied her face intently. "Are you really afraid of me, April? Or is this a game?" "I don't know what I'm more afraid of, you or going back to Westbrook," she said. It was the truth, and Daniel seemed to sense it. "Catherine told you, didn't she, about Frank Donovan?" April nodded. "And now you think she's your friend? Your protector?" He smiled bitterly. "Catherine has never protected anyone but herself. She's protecting Olivia, using her as a weapon against me." Daniel slammed his fist on the table. Then, seeing April flinch, He forced himself to calm down. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to scare you. He moved closer. Listen, April, I know how this looks. I'm older, married, I have money problems. But I really care about you, and I can help you with Frank Donovan. How? I have friends in law enforcement, not here, in another state. They can put pressure on him, get him to drop the charges. April looked hopeful. You can really do that? Of course, but I need your help. What kind of help? Daniel walked over to the safe in the corner of the office, opened it, and took out a folder. Catherine's been gathering dirt on me. Letters, photos, financial documents. Most of it's in her office, in a hiding place behind the bookcase. April feigned surprise. Why would she do that? Insurance? In case of divorce or something worse? Daniel looked at her intently. I want you to find those documents and bring them to me. In exchange, I'll solve your problem with your stepfather. But how am I going to get into her office? It's always locked. She has a session with Mrs. Bennett tomorrow at 3. She always leaves the keys in her bag in the hall. Daniel handed her a piece of paper. Here's the code to the safe where she keeps her most important things. You'll have about an hour. April took the piece of paper, feeling her fingers tremble. What if she catches me? She won't. I'll keep an eye out. He put his hand on her shoulder. Do you trust me, April? She forced herself to nod. Yes. Good, he smiled, because you're the only one I can trust right now. Later that night, April quietly knocked on Catherine's bedroom door. Catherine opened it almost immediately, as if she had been waiting for her. He asked me to steal your documents, April whispered, glancing down the hallway. Catherine nodded. I thought so. What exactly does he want? Everything you have on him. He said most of it is in a hiding place behind the bookcase in your office. Clever. There is a hiding place there, but not with Daniel's documents. Catherine pursed her lips. What did you say to him? I agreed. He offered to solve my problem with my stepfather in exchange for the documents. And you believed him? April shook her head. No, but I wanted him to think I did. A look of approval flashed across Catherine's face. Good. Tomorrow I'll leave at 3, but not for a session. I have a meeting with a lawyer. She paused. Do you understand how dangerous this is, April? Daniel is unpredictable, especially when he feels threatened. I understand, but I have no choice. April looked firmly into her eyes. Neither of us has a choice. That night, lying awake in her bed, April thought about how strange her life had become. She had escaped one cage only to find herself in another, even more dangerous one. But now, she had hope. Fragile, uncertain, but hope, nonetheless, for freedom. Outside, a new day was dawning. A day that would change everything. The day of the operation arrived too quickly. The morning at the Foster house passed in tense calm. Daniel left for work earlier than usual. Catherine tended to her patients in her office, and April took Olivia to school and returned home, feeling her anxiety grow with each passing hour. At 2 o'clock, Catherine walked into the kitchen, where April was preparing lunch. I'm leaving, she said, placing her bag on the table. I'll pick up Olivia from school and take her to her friend's birthday party. I'll be back at 6. Her eyes met April's, and a flash of understanding passed between them. The bag remained on the table deliberately, with the keys in plain sight. Okay, April nodded. I'll have dinner ready when you get back. When Catherine left, April called Daniel as they had agreed. She left to pick up Olivia, then she's going to a meeting. Her bag with the keys is in the kitchen. Perfect, Daniel said, sounding satisfied. I'll be there in 20 minutes. Wait for me. April spent those 20 minutes pacing around the kitchen, trying to calm her wildly beating heart. She knew she was walking on thin ice. Catherine had promised protection, but would she be able to stand up to Daniel if things didn't go according to plan? The sound of a car pulling up interrupted her thoughts. Daniel entered through the back door, looking surprisingly calm. Are you ready? He asked, glancing around the kitchen. Where are the keys? April pointed to her bag. Okay, the plan is simple. You go into the study, find the hiding place behind the bookcase, and take out all the documents. I'll watch from the yard and warn you if Catherine comes back early. April nodded. What's in the documents? Nothing special, just personal papers she's using against me. Daniel waved his hand dismissively, but his tense expression told a different story. They walked together to Catherine's office door. April took out the key and inserted it into the lock. "Be careful." Daniel touched her shoulder. "And don't forget, your future depends on this." April entered the office and closed the door behind her. The space seemed charged with a strange energy, echoes of strangers' confessions, tears, fears. Catherine had taken patients here, listened to their secrets, helped them deal with the demons of their past. Now April stood here, ready to delve into Catherine's own secrets. She headed for the bookcase in the far corner. According to the plan she had worked out with Catherine the day before, she was supposed to pretend to be looking for a hiding place, but in fact take a specific folder from the desk drawer, a folder containing copies of documents that might interest Daniel without revealing the location of the originals. April moved a few books, pretending to look for a lever or a button. Then, making sure that her efforts were visible through the window, she pretended to accidentally drop a book, and bending over to pick it up, quickly moved to the desk. The top drawer was unlocked. Inside was a folder labeled Insurance, the one Catherine had mentioned. April opened it and flipped through the contents, photos of Daniel with various women, bank statements showing large transfers to unknown accounts, copies of promissory notes. In one of the photos, April was surprised to recognize Liz, the former nanny Catherine had told her about. The girl looked frightened, and there was a bruise on her wrist. At that moment, April's phone rang. It was Daniel. "Did you find anything?" he asked impatiently. "Yes, there's a hiding place, but it's locked with a combination lock," April lied. "I'm trying to open it with the code you gave me." "Keep looking. I'll be back soon." April's heart sank. "Are you leaving? Where?" "An unexpected visitor. Sheriff Baker is pulling up to the house. I need to talk to him so he doesn't come inside." The connection was cut, and April froze in panic. The sheriff was here? Was this part of Catherine's plan, or an unexpected complication? She hurried back to the bookcase, trying to collect her thoughts. If the sheriff came into the house and found her in Catherine's study with the folder in her hands, it would be all over. But if she didn't follow the plan, Daniel might suspect her of double-crossing him. April resolutely returned to the desk, grabbed the folder, and headed for the door. She had to give the documents to Daniel as planned. It was the only way to keep his trust. From the hallway, she heard muffled voices. Daniel and Sheriff Baker were talking on the porch. She quietly crept closer, trying to hear their conversation. "Just a routine check, Daniel," the sheriff said. "We've got some new information on the Liz Connors case." "I already told you everything I know." Daniel's voice sounded tense. "She worked for us as a nanny, then suddenly left. No problems, no conflicts." "What about this?" There was a rustling of paper. "Surveillance footage from the motel where Liz was found. It shows you leaving her room 2 hours before the maid found her unconscious." There was a heavy pause. "I was visiting her," Daniel finally said. "She called me and said she wasn't feeling well. I brought her some medicine and left." "And you didn't mention that when we interviewed everyone who had been in contact with her in the last few days? It would have looked suspicious. I wanted to avoid any gossip. But now, it looks even worse, Daniel." The sheriff's voice hardened, especially in light of Liz's new testimony. "She woke up." Daniel's voice betrayed his fear. 2 weeks ago, and she has a very interesting version of events." April froze, listening to every word. So Liz had regained consciousness after all and told the sheriff something. But what exactly? "Thomas, let's not discuss this on the porch." Daniel's voice became conciliatory. "Let's go inside, have some coffee, talk like old friends. I'm on duty, Daniel, and I'd prefer you come with me to the station. Now, I have a meeting in an hour. It won't take long, unless, of course, you have something to hide." There was another silence. "All right," Daniel finally said. "Give me a minute to grab my jacket." April barely had time to duck around the corner before the door opened and Daniel entered the house. He didn't notice her, heading straight for the stairs to the second floor. April seized the moment and slipped into the living room, hiding the folder under a sofa cushion. A few minutes later, Daniel came downstairs wearing his jacket, his face full of determination. He glanced around quickly, as if looking for April, but didn't call her. Instead, he went out onto the porch and said to the sheriff, "I'll take my car. I'll meet you at the station." "As you say," the sheriff replied, and soon both cars were driving away from the house. As soon as they were out of sight, April took out her phone and dialed Catherine's number. "The sheriff just took Daniel to the station," she blurted out as soon as Catherine answered. "Something to do with Liz Connors." She woke up and gave a statement. There was a short pause. Then Catherine said calmly, "I know. I spoke to the sheriff this morning. You knew this was going to happen? Why didn't you warn me?" "Because your reaction had to be genuine if Daniel was around," Catherine replied. "Did you find the folder?" "Yes." "Good. Now listen carefully. You need to pack your things and leave. Right now." April was confused. "Leave? Where? Why?" "Because Daniel isn't going to the station," Catherine said urgently. "He'll come home as soon as he gets away from the sheriff, and he'll be furious." "But how can you be sure?" "Because I know him, April. Better than anyone." Catherine paused. "Liz told me that Daniel threatened her when she wanted to break up with him, that he followed her, stalked her, and that on that day at the motel, he didn't just bring her medicine." April felt a chill run down her spine. "What did he do?" "That doesn't matter now. What matters is that the sheriff doesn't have enough evidence to arrest him. Only suspicions. Daniel will realize that and come back, and the first thing he'll do is check to see if you found the documents. And if he finds out that I was working for you..." "Exactly. Pack your things and leave. A man with a ticket and money will meet you at the bus station. I'll join you in a couple of days, once I've settled Olivia with my mother." April froze, realizing the reality of the situation. "What about the sheriff? Isn't he supposed to protect us?" "The sheriff is an old friend of Daniel's. Even if he suspects something, he'll give him a head start. Time to solve the problem." "The problem? You mean me?" "Me too," Catherine replied quietly. "Now go, quickly." April rushed upstairs, stuffed her things into her backpack, and ran downstairs. She grabbed the folder from under her pillow and headed for the door, but suddenly stopped. Something was bothering her. Catherine seemed too confident, too prepared. It was as if she had been expecting this to happen. April remembered Daniel's words about Catherine only protecting herself. What if she was using April the same way she had used Daniel? April quickly opened the folder and looked through its contents again. Among the photos and financial documents, she found a police report about the incident with Liz, a report dated 2 months earlier. It said that Liz had attempted suicide due to a breakup and emotional abuse by a partner whose name she refused to disclose. But Catherine had just said that Liz had regained consciousness 2 weeks ago and had given a statement against Daniel. How did this report appear? April's heart pounded even harder. Catherine had lied. But why? Further reflection was interrupted by the sound of a car pulling up. April looked out the window and was horrified to see Daniel's car returning home. There was no time to think. She grabbed her backpack and folder and slipped out the back door, just as the front door opened. Shadows of Pine Valley. Part 5. Investigation and Truth Summary. April Madison, caught between the feuding foster spouses, helped Catherine gather compromising material on Daniel, while pretending to help Daniel steal documents from his wife's office. During the operation, Sheriff Baker unexpectedly showed up and took Daniel away for questioning, mentioning Liz Connors, a former nanny who had attempted suicide and recently regained consciousness. Catherine ordered April to run away immediately, claiming that Daniel was dangerous and would return soon. However, while looking through the documents in the folder, April discovered a discrepancy between Catherine's words and the police report, which made her doubt Catherine's truthfulness. Just as Daniel returned home, April slipped out the back door. The history of Pine Valley had never looked so sinister as it did at that moment, as April ran through the deserted streets, clutching her backpack and the ill-fated folder. The spring air was filled with the scent of blossoming trees, but to her it seemed suffocating. April turned down a side street, trying to collect her thoughts. Should she run to the bus station, as Catherine had told her? But now she wasn't sure she could trust that plan. Go to the sheriff? But if he really was Daniel's friend, that would be like jumping into the lion's den. With trembling hands, she took out her phone and dialed the only number that came to mind. "Hello, this is Olivia Foster," a child's voice answered after the third ring. "Olivia, it's April. Where are you?" "At Sophie's birthday party. Mom left me and drove away." The girl's voice sounded confused. "Are you okay? You sound strange." "Listen, Olivia." April tried to speak calmly. "Do you know where your mom went?" "No, but she took a big bag, like for a trip." April's heart skipped a beat. A big bag? Catherine wasn't just planning to take her daughter to a birthday party. She was preparing to leave. "Thank you, sweetie. Everything's fine. Enjoy the party." April hung up, feeling panic rising inside her. The folder. She had to look through it more carefully. Something wasn't right about this story, and the answers might be hidden in those documents. April looked around and headed for a small park. There, on a bench under an old oak tree, she opened the folder and began methodically reviewing each document. The police report on Liz Connors stated that the pills she had taken were strong sleeping pills prescribed to Catherine Foster. Under reasons, the officer had written Liz's words. He said his wife knows about us and is going to ruin my life, that she's using her influence to make sure I never find a job. She's a therapist. She can convince everyone that I'm unstable. April froze. This completely contradicted Catherine's version that Daniel had been stalking and threatening Liz. But who to believe? Further searches in the folder raised even more questions. Financial documents showed that Catherine had been systematically transferring money from joint accounts to secret offshore accounts. She had been doing this for 5 years, much longer than Daniel's alleged gambling problem. Among the papers were copies of letters from Mrs. Parker's lawyers, another former nanny. She threatened legal action for defamation, emotional abuse, and creating a hostile work environment. But these letters were not addressed to Daniel, but to Catherine. April felt a lump rise in her throat. Had she been a pawn in someone else's game all this time? What if Catherine, not Daniel, was the real manipulator in the Foster family? The phone in her hand vibrated, an unknown number. "April." Daniel's voice sounded tense. "Where are you?" Her first instinct was to hang up, but something stopped her. "How did you get this number?" "It was on the call log on the home phone. Listen, you're in danger. Catherine, she's not who she says she is." "Who is she?" April tried to keep her voice calm. "She has borderline personality disorder, obsessive-compulsive behavior. She spent years creating the image of the perfect family and destroying anyone who threatened that image." "You expect me to believe that? After everything you've done?" "I've made a lot of mistakes, April. I tried to find comfort elsewhere when I realized my marriage was a facade. But I never threatened anyone," he said sincerely. "Ask yourself, why did the nannies change so often? Why did Catherine always find fault with them, see them as a threat? Why did she so persistently collect dirt on me all these years?" April was silent, piecing together the facts. "The documents," Daniel said after a pause. "Did you find them?" "Yes." "And what do they say?" "A police report where Liz says she wasn't afraid of you, but of Catherine. Financial documents showing that Catherine had been embezzling money for years. Letters from Mrs. Parker's lawyer accusing Catherine of slander." There was silence. "Now you understand," Daniel finally said. "Catherine set the same trap for you that she did for Liz. She made you fear me, convinced you that I was dangerous, and that she was your protector. But why?" April couldn't understand Catherine's motivation. "Control, always control," Daniel smiled bitterly. "And money. When the sheriff took me away, I finally connected the dots. Catherine plans to disappear with Olivia and all our savings, which she has been hiding for years, and she used you as a scapegoat." "A scapegoat?" "Think about it. I'm suddenly arrested, my wife and daughter disappear, and traces of a nanny wanted for theft in Westbrook are found in the house. How does that look?" April felt the blood drain from her veins. Like you found out about my arrest, decided to rob the house and kidnap Olivia for ransom, or worse." It sounded so absurd that it could have been true. "Where's Catherine?" April asked. "At the bank. The sheriff tracked her down on CCTV. She's emptying the safe deposit box." "And Olivia?" "At a friend's birthday party. I'm on my way to pick her up." April closed her eyes. trying to think. Who was telling the truth? Daniel, whose voice sounded sincere, or Catherine, who had warned her about the danger her husband posed? April, go to the police station. Sheriff Baker will meet you there. He knows the truth and will protect you. Why should I believe you? Because I'm the only one trying to save you, not use you, Daniel said quietly. And because you already found the evidence in that folder. After a pause, April said firmly, "Okay, I'll go to the station." The Pine Valley Police Station was a small building with an American flag above the entrance. April nervously entered, clutching the folder in her hands. "I'm here to see Sheriff Baker," she said to the woman behind the desk. "Of course, dear. He's waiting for you," she said, pointing to a door at the back of the room. Sheriff Baker looked tired, but his eyes were clear and sharp. "Miss Madison, I'm glad you came. Is it true? What Daniel said about Catherine?" The sheriff sighed. "I've known that family for 15 years. I've watched them tear each other apart. Daniel sought solace on the side. Catherine created the perfect facade and controlled his every move." He pointed to the folder in April's hands. "Is this what I think it is?" April nodded and handed him the documents. "We suspected something like this, but we never had any proof," the sheriff said, looking through the papers. "Liz didn't want to press charges. Mrs. Parker also dropped the lawsuit." "Did Catherine intimidate them?" "Maybe, or bribe them. She's a very smart woman." The sheriff looked up at April. "But this time she went too far. We got an arrest warrant after we found out she was planning to leave the country with fake documents and a large sum of money." The door to the sheriff's office opened and Daniel entered. He was holding Olivia's hand, and she looked confused and frightened. "Dad says Mom left," she said when she saw April. "And you were going to leave too." April knelt down in front of the girl. "I'm not going anywhere, Olivia. I'm here." At that moment, a message came over the sheriff's radio. "Suspect spotted at Westfield Airport, heading toward the international terminal." "They're going to arrest her," the sheriff said, standing up. "I need to be there." When the sheriff left, Daniel sat down next to Olivia. "Sweetie, you need to go with Officer Jean. She'll show you the rest area where there's a TV and toys." After Olivia left, Daniel turned to April. "Thank you for believing me." "I don't know who to believe," April admitted honestly. "This is all too confusing." "I know," he said, sitting down next to her. "Catherine and I destroyed each other for years. She controlled, I ran. She built a perfect life, I sabotaged it. It was a vicious cycle. What about Liz? What really happened to her?" Daniel lowered his eyes. "We were seeing each other. She was young, energetic, full of life. Everything Catherine hadn't been in years. But when Catherine found out, she started a psychological war. She convinced Liz that I was dangerous, that I had a string of nannies who were all lovers, and that they all ended badly. She scared her so badly that she tried to kill herself. And Mrs. Parker? She couldn't take the constant pressure and nagging from Catherine. She quit and threatened to sue for creating a toxic work environment. Catherine bribed her to keep it quiet." April shook her head. "And you let all this happen?" "I was weak," Daniel admitted. "Too afraid of losing Olivia, my reputation, my life. But now everything will change." A young officer peeked into the office. "Mr. Foster, you have a call. It's Sheriff Baker." Daniel left, leaving April alone with her thoughts. She didn't know what to think. Catherine, with her piercing gaze and convincing warnings, seemed sincere. But Daniel didn't look like a liar either, especially when he admitted his mistakes. Perhaps the truth lay somewhere in between, two broken people destroying each other and everyone around them. Daniel returned a few minutes later. His face was pale. "What happened?" April asked. "Catherine, she killed herself." April froze. "What? How?" "When the police tried to arrest her at the airport, she pulled out a gun. She threatened to shoot, but then..." He fell silent, unable to continue. April covered her face with her hands. This couldn't be happening. Just a few hours ago, Catherine had seemed so composed, so in control. "What about Olivia?" she asked, thinking of the little girl whose world had just been shattered. "She needs stability, support." Daniel looked at April hopefully. "Will you stay?" April paused, staring out the window at the quiet streets of Pine Valley. The town that had seemed so idyllic hid dark secrets behind its immaculate facades. "No," she finally said. "I can't. Too many lies, too much pain." "I understand," Daniel nodded. "What about your problems in Westbrook?" "I'll go back and face them head on. I'll tell them the truth about Frank Donovan and my mother's money." April felt a strange sense of relief at her decision. Enough lying and running away. 6 months later, April sat in a college lecture hall listening to a psychology lecture. After returning to Westbrook, she had indeed faced the truth. With the help of a lawyer recommended by Sheriff Baker, she proved her right to her mother's inheritance and was cleared of the theft charges. In the evenings, she worked at a local coffee shop to pay for her education. Life was difficult, but honest and free from manipulation. Sometimes she thought about Pine Valley, the Foster family, and what might have been. She learned from the news that Daniel had sold the house and moved with Olivia to another state. The letters that sometimes came from the little girl talked about a new school, new friends, and a dad who was better. April hoped it was true, that the vicious cycle of lies and manipulation had finally been broken. But sometimes, on dark nights when she couldn't sleep, she was tormented by doubts. What if the tragedy at the airport was Daniel's last manipulation? What if Catherine was really trying to save herself and her daughter from a dangerous man? The truth in Pine Valley remained buried under layers of lies, half-truths, and manipulation. Each participant in the drama took their own version of events with them. But for April, it was a lesson. A lesson about the price of truth, the destructive power of manipulation, and the need to face the truth no matter how painful it may be. Her phone vibrated in her pocket. A message from an unknown number. April opened it, and her heart skipped a beat. Sometimes the truth stays buried, but not forever. Be careful. L. Liz? Was her former nanny trying to warn her about something? Or was it just her imagination, another shadow from Pine Valley haunting her even here? April closed her phone and focused on the lecture. Whatever had happened in the past, she wasn't going to live in fear anymore. No more shadows, no more lies. It was time for the truth, whatever it was.